Aloha, I'm Representative Jordan. Today on Jordan's Journal, I have my guest, Chair Designate, Jobie Masagatani with Department of Hawaiian Homelands,
Yes.
also known as DHHL.
Yes.
So aloha, Jobie, could
Aloha.
you introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background about you, and maybe a little bit about the department?
Okay. As you mentioned, Jobie Masagatani. I actually am a 1982 graduate of Kamehameha Schools. My mother is Hawaiian, she's Collins, and my father is Japanese, Masagatani. I did my undergraduate work at Northwestern and my graduate work at Princeton, and actually was at the department during the Cayetano administration, the first and second Cayetano administrations as the deputy, deputy to the chairman. So the department is something I'm familiar with.
Oh, wow.
I've worked at many of the Native Hawaiian agencies, at Kamehameha Schools, at the Queen's Health Systems. The only agency I haven't worked at, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, where I was most recently before coming to this position. The only agency I haven't had the opportunity to work for is Queen Liliuokalani Children's Center or the Trust. So maybe after this, there'll be that opportunity. So I've been in this position. The governor, I was very humbled when he asked if I would take this position, and came to this position in May of 2012. And so I've been there since May, and it's been an exciting journey so far. Yeah, absolutely. A little bit about the department. We're a very old agency, actually started as a federal program in 1921 by Prince Jonah Kuhio Kalanianaole. And as a condition of statehood, the state actually accepted responsibility for this program. Not many people know that. Oh. And so our program, there are over 200,000 acres that were set aside of public lands in trust for our Native Hawaiian beneficiaries that are defined as 50% Hawaiian or more, and their eligible successors, which are 25%, at least 25%. Our core program is about homesteading, and the whole purpose for the program was to return our people back to the lands to help with quote-unquote rehabilitation, which I see as how we support and grow as a people. And so our homesteading program is 3 parts. We have residential homesteading, which most people are familiar with, but we also have agricultural as well as pastoral homesteads as well. Right now we have 10,000 leases, which represent 10,000 families across the state, and another 26,000 individuals waiting for an opportunity to reside on the homelands. Wow. Because one person can have more than one application, they can have one residential and one agricultural, one residential and one pastoral. We have almost 42,000 applications representing those 26,000 individuals. Yeah, that's a
deep list.
Yes, it's a very, very deep list. And so, we're a small agency. We have 200 positions, but only 130 warm bodies across the state. The staff works incredibly hard. And I share the responsibility with 8 other individuals that sit on the commission as the head of the agency. So I wear 2 hats. One is a chair of the commission, and one is a director of the department.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's balancing the two.
Yes, wow. Yes, yeah.
So when you're talking about 11,000, that would be people living on properties?
Yes, almost 10,000 leases, yes, that are actually residents of the homelands, or farmers on the homelands having agricultural lots, or ranchers, pasture lots.
Okay. So pasture lots, you don't live on those?
You can. Okay. Some people do, but you're not required to reside on a pasture lot. Same with an agricultural lot, you can, but you're not required to reside on an agricultural lot. Yeah.
So maybe let's expand upon that a little bit before you go further. So most of your lands are located on Oahu or spread out through the islands? Spread
out through the islands. Actually, Oahu has one of our smallest concentration of lands. We have lands on the Big Island, Maui, Molokai, Kauai, and Lanai, as well as Oahu. And in some cases, our list for our agricultural lands is actually longer, the applicant list for the agricultural lands, than even our residential list.
Wow.
So it's a very, very diverse department in terms of what we have to look at and the issues that we need to look at, and going forward, and the needs that we need to address for our constituency.
And I would assume more of those agriculture or pastoral lands would be on the neighbor islands versus the Oahu?
Yes, so on the island of Maui, we have some agricultural lands. On the island of Hawaii, of course, some of our best lands are on the island of Hawaii. And for me, my hope is that one of the areas of focus that I'd like to look at is actually the ag program. We have not done an ag award since the 1980s.
Wow.
And so, really looking at that and trying to partner with the Department of Agriculture as to how we can do it better, because we do have ag awards that are not being utilized by homesteaders.
Oh, okay.
Maybe for a whole host of reasons. In some cases, we have homesteaders who did actually actively cultivate, but now they're older. And so how can we look at our ag lands and working with Department of Agriculture, plug in better to those services versus growing an entire ag department within the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, which doesn't make sense. Yeah. So that's kind of an area of focus for this, hopefully for this administration, to really look at that. How can we do it better? How can we support existing ag lessees better? Mm-hmm. And in some cases, if we have to move towards enforcement, how do we transition that so that people are not surprised if we have to move towards enforcement?
Well, I think that's a good idea, because looking along the lines of sustainability and how can we can promote more agriculture.
Right.
And I think that's a good idea with working with another sister agency to promote expediting getting more Native Hawaiians onto those agriculture lots.
Yes.
Where we can go from that. I like that idea. That's really, I really like that. Yeah.
And it's some of I had mentioned Hawaii, but also Kauai has some beautiful ag properties that are DHHL, and people that have been waiting. So we really need to bring the focus to that and make this move forward and make that a priority. Mm-hmm. So
now I know some of the issues that I've heard in the past is the infrastructure getting to some of your properties, because not all your properties are close to infrastructure, meaning water or electricity or normal modern conveniences, and you as a department struggle with how you I mean, that's where some of this balance comes from, right? Could you explain a little bit about that also?
Sure. So and let me just take a step back. So when the state accepted responsibility for our program, there was and part of the Constitutional Convention, there isn't a requirement for the legislature to make sufficient funding available for our program. And this is actually a focus of litigation, called a court case that was brought by a group of beneficiaries who felt the state had not provided sufficient funding for the purposes of our program. And the reason why I mention this is because you're absolutely correct that infrastructure and getting the lands to a state, especially in the residential lots, mm-hmm. to a standard that lessees can move on to is very expensive. When I was a deputy, I remember the average cost being around $75,000 a lot. It's probably double that now on average. Mm. In some cases, it's even more depending on slope and topography and all of those kinds of conditions. So for us, there's always a need for resources to develop the lots, a need for resources to provide for the financial products that make it more affordable for our homesteaders, our Native Hawaiian communities. As you know, a lot of our population, they're working, but they're not necessarily at the highest income levels. And so, making our product affordable is an important aspect of our program, I think. Overall for the state, again, when I think this governor, as well as, when I was the deputy, even though our program is focused on Native Hawaiians, if it creates housing for a Native Hawaiian family, that frees up housing for somebody else. So overall, it provides for, I think, greater opportunity for the entire state. In addition, anytime we're turning dirt, that means people are employed, and it helps move. It helps move the economy in times when the private sector is slumping. And so. Our program, I think, especially because we have lands on every island, Maui, the Big Island, Kauai, when we're turning dirt on those islands, that creates jobs for those people, it creates housing for families, and in those counties where we have affordable housing credits, and right now there's a law that says, every lot we do, we can get credit from the county.
Yes.
And it's in some jurisdictions, it's created interest for developers, that they're not able to move their properties. They want to trade for us, or they've paid for those credits. When we get funding for that, it allows us to develop additionally in that community, additional product, and we're able to, the funding we would have used to use for something else that supports that community as well. So it's almost like you get a recycling of the money 2 or 3 times with that, So even though our program is focused on a specific community, it does benefit the entire state, when it gets supported with funding the way it needs to get supported.
So now, going back with the department, it's my understanding that the department, most of its funding comes in reference to a settlement that was many years ago.
Most right now, yes. On our CIP side, we received, so in 1995, the state settled the land claims with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands that were long-standing. And it sounds kind of weird, but because our agency has a specific fiduciary obligation to the Native Hawaiian beneficiaries, we have a responsibility to advocate for them. So in any case, in 95, there was a settlement that resulted in a commitment to pay $30 million a year for 20 years. And we are almost at the end of that settlement payment. So those monies, because we didn't, receive many capital improvement projects funding, CIP funding, has primarily gone to fund our CIP projects, both new developments as well as repairing existing subdivisions, infrastructure for existing subdivisions. On our operational side, 100% of our operations and all the rest of our programs are funded with resources DHHL raises itself through general leasing our lands. And that's, one of the issues that's been involved in this litigation I had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so with this litigation now says that there should be appropriate funding that comes in for the operations of the department outside of this settlement of the roughly $30 million a year, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So the Nelson litigation was based on a case that a group of beneficiaries brought against both the state as well as the Hawaiian Homes Commission, saying that the state was negligent in its responsibility in making, quote unquote, sufficient sums available as required under the Constitution for the 4 purposes for Hawaiian homelands. Purpose 1 being lot development, Purpose 2 being loans, Purpose 3 being rehabilitation projects, and Purpose 4 being operations and administration. The first 3 purposes, the Supreme Court, which just ruled last year in the spring, said were political questions that the legislature determines what is sufficient: lots, loans, rehabilitation programs. But the court said that it could determine operations and administration. And so that's where, it becomes really important that this body, the legislature, really look at what is sufficient to run our operations and look at funding that out of the general fund resources. From an equity standpoint, it's fair to say, because we are a state agency, that agency should be funded, its operations administration, just like many of the other agencies, by the general funds of the state. And that the resources that are raised by the homelands themselves, our general leasing, should go back to programs or lot development or loans that directly benefit the beneficiaries.
For the trust purposes.
For the trust purposes,
okay,
yes. Yeah, to advance the purposes of the program and for the trust,
So I think this year is a new day. So
yes,
with your new budget that you proposed to the governor and then he submitted to the legislature, was asking for these particular operational funds.
Yes, yes. So we asked for 25.7 million in operations and administration, and an additional 17.3 for what we consider operations and administration, but is actually like repair and maintenance capital improvement projects, because there are a number of subdivisions, and this is an issue of discussion, and we're trying to clarify with the county that we're actually putting in, which may not be our responsibility, but because lessees are facing, sidewalks or sewers that are not working or whatever. So, but in terms of like operations and administration, our personnel and other related expenditures, we asked for 25.7 million. In the governor's budget, what came to the legislature was 14.7 million in general funding, which is, 3 to 4 times more than this agency has ever received in its history for operations and administration. So it's a significant and important amount for the agency. Would be it's very significant if we are able to get that supported by the legislature.
Yeah, and especially, well, when I look at it this way, this is going to be like one of the first times we've asked for this, and getting
Yes.
the members of the body, the legislative body, to understand that we need to start, in my opinion, shoring up this department with general funds for operation purposes, because that $30 million is possibly going to go away in another couple years.
Yes,
Due
absolutely.
to that settlement purpose,
Yes.
right? And at which
Yes.
time you as a department has to start looking at how do you generate revenues to replace the 30 million or more
Yes.
as a department, right?
Well, the more, the obligation to provide resources for the department for CIP doesn't go away from the legislature.
Okay.
But because that issue is what's sufficient is something the legislature defines, the more we can utilize our resources that the department generates to pay for our lot development, it eases out the ups and downs of CIP funding. And that's the hardest part about our program is the difference between prior years and the 20 years that we had a reliable cash flow is people could plan. So when you said this project is likely to be developed in 3 to 5 years, if you have that reliability of cash flow, people can plan with some level of certainty that okay, if I start saving my money now and get my credit in order, then I'll be ready, versus we do the plan, we get money to do planning, and then we have to wait for 5 years before we can do design monies, and then we have to wait for 3 years before we can do construction. So if those trust fund resources, as well as the monies that are generated on the homelands through general leasing, can all go to our capital improvements or other types of programs, it allows for that certainty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in the years where we get CIP, it allows us to do more. But in the years where maybe the CIP is not as much, it's still a steady amount of development that we can do, and that's so critical.
Yeah.
So having that operations paid for by general funds frees up those resources so that we can use them to kind of even out our planning on our capital improvements projects, and that helps us, helps all of our beneficiaries.
Yeah. That's because that's what you hear. Some beneficiaries will say, well, I've been on here 20, 30, 40 years.
Right.
And it's because this is what you're saying. Sometimes the planning on some of these, it doesn't come through in the end, or it gets changed to something else.
Right.
That's what I'm kind of, they might not have, because they actually pick spots where they want to be, right? When they put their applications in.
Actually, they wait on an island-wide list, and there, previously we did have area lists, and so actually we do preserve that waiting order because they're older lists. But right now, if you were to apply, you would apply for the whole island.
Okay.
But you're right that a number of factors have to come together. People have to want to live there. They have to be able to afford what is being offered. If there's actually a house on it, they have to, have the appropriate income if they have to qualify for financing and all of that. But it's a life decision, right?
Oh yeah.
And so
yeah.
And sometimes people are waiting because they want to retire, or they're holding a spot for their children. There's a whole bunch of reasons. But the more we can be certain on our planning, the better other people can make decisions about their own lives. And I think that's what that stability and cash flow lends to us, is the ability, to be able to plan with some level of certainty as we move forward, right? So.
And talking about planning, you guys
Yes.
are in the middle of doing some planning, right?
Yes, we are. In fact, we are coming out in the next month with an Oahu Island plan. that plan will give us some idea. We haven't done one before. We've done regional plans for this island, and so the island plan will incorporate the regional planning work, but will also give us a better idea of our land use designations, because the commission has authority over our lands in terms of land use and those kinds of things. Give us an idea of because we have such limited land here, what people's preferences are. Is there is there a willingness to accept, let's say, multifamily, to find out, okay, if there's an opportunity for lands to be either purchased or exchanged, what is the preference of our beneficiary to potentially grow the land base. So it's a great opportunity for our beneficiaries to have input and into the land use designations for this island. So we'll be coming out in March. There'll be surveys that'll be coming out to applicants, and then there'll be a bunch of open houses to find out more information, and then beneficiary consultation, and just outreach to the public as well as our beneficiaries. So the best place to get information is our website. Yeah.
We have a website. Wow.
Yes, we do.
We are going into the technology world.
Slowly. Yeah. Yes. So we actually just upgraded our website, so it's got a brand new look.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
But you also, because I had with the previous chair, he had come out to my community and had a meeting, and they were trying to reach out to beneficiaries more ways, and I think through your website, through communications such as letters, which can be very costly to your department, right?
Right.
To mail out to your whole list. So
yes,
I think these sources of media outreach through social media has it become beneficial for you folks?
I think so. I think it's a generational thing. Some people are much more comfortable with the social media, but it's and that's a cost-effective way for us to communicate. The website, of course, and we're trying to look at utilizing the YouTube and other ways to reach out to our community, so that we can educate people about our program and more effectively through giving limited resources. We also, of course, a lot of our waiting list, they're older, so.
Yes. Yeah.
The computer is kind of something that's so they like getting the piece of paper, and I recognize how important that is, and so we do try to make sure we, for important beneficiary consultation, that we do reach out to the community of beneficiaries within that community, and I think that's really important to do that, to make sure that people, when it's important enough that that we gave them the opportunity to come and learn and provide feedback. And if they choose not to take that opportunity, that's their choice. But at least they were given that opportunity to have input and feedback, to what's going on.
But this is going to be like strategic planning for the island of Oahu.
Yes, more land use planning for the island of Oahu. Okay. Yes, and. As I mentioned, we had done a lot of work with our regional plans, and we're really trying to, the planning office has done an excellent job, but really trying to utilize that planning document as a way to communicate to our beneficiaries as to what the future holds for our islands and for our regions.
But you do go out to the community. You have commission meetings that rotate out to the different islands and different communities on those particular islands, and I'm sure you put that on your web page too.
Yes.
So when people know when those can come up, and that's where you gather information also, right?
Yes. So we have a monthly commission meeting, and then 6 months out of the year we go to all of the neighbor islands, different locations depending on the year, and whenever we go to the neighbor islands, as well as on this island, we do an evening meeting in the community, and it's a great opportunity it's our opportunity to hear from the communities, as well as to provide information to that community about what the issues of concern are for that community. In addition, any beneficiary, any individual can request to address the commission about a concern. We just ask for that to be in writing in 2 weeks before. That's probably the best. And of course, our meetings are all public, and we have very, very active discussions. It's a great place to come and learn about what's happening, at the department and at the commission. A lot of dialogue.
Sounds like there's a lot going on.
There's a lot. There's a lot going on.
This is just not, people on waiting lists trying to get on, you know, homestead or an ag lot. I mean, there's just a lot of dynamics going on with, you know,
Yes.
what has to be provided to the beneficiaries, and
Yes.
how do we move that forward in these new economic times of development of some of your lands that probably won't be for residential purposes, but for, you know, revenue
Yes.
driving purposes for your particular department, right?
Yes, and in fact, when I was here before about 15 years as a deputy, the focus was mostly on housing and how to make housing more affordable and financing and all of that. I did not expect when I came back that about 75% of my time has been focused on alternative energy.
Wow.
And it's been really interesting. And so, you know, our properties have become very, you know, very attractive to alternative energy providers.
Yeah.
And we actually are looking at opportunities on the island of Maui. And we actually will be out seeking beneficiary consultation and input on our energy policy as well as our water policy over the next year. So it'll be a big year for us coming out to the communities, and you know, a lot going on. And that I know a lot going.
Just not homestead anymore.
I know. I wish it was
Yeah.
just homestead. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all focused on that. It's all focused on the trust and the trust resources and about.
And,
You know,
and I
our
guess
programs.
how do we get those beneficiaries on those lands?
Exactly. That's the bottom
Yeah.
line.
And
Yeah, how do we support
and
them?
then eventually maybe being self-sustainable on your. I
Yes.
mean, I know that the topic
Yes.
can go on forever, but
Yes.
if you don't have that vision and if you're not putting it in planning going forward, it
Yes.
can get lost somewhere in
Right.
the pages. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
But we're
Yeah.
running out of time.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to really thank you for coming, Jobie.
Well,
I really
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, from the first time I met you, I've been very impressed. Let's say that. Yes.
thank you
yeah.
very much.
I'm really happy that you've decided to take this challenge on.
It's been a learning experience and a great experience to have some wonderful people that work with me at the department. So I'm very thankful for that, and a lot of support out in the community. So I'm thankful for that, and for your support as well.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to thank you for joining us here on Jordan's Journal, and we'll see you soon. Aloha.